Welcome to Sage Advice, wisdom that can save your life. We're your hosts, Dr. Kunal Om Goel and Dr. Elizabeth Sage Epstein. We're so excited to start this second episode. Really our first episode diving into a topic that we both love and are so passionate about, and that's diet.
I think when people think about diets, they think about a restrictive pattern, usually aimed at weight loss.
Right.
And it's kind of a negative thing. It's a bit of a punishment. And a lot of us really enjoy food. It's such an amazing part of life. And so I think we want to talk about diet in focusing on an eating pattern that has healthy foods that are like medicine.
We often don't think about diet as medicine. We think about getting our food in. Sometimes we're on the go. Sometimes we're in a hurry, in a rush. We have patterns since we were kids that we tend to fall into and carry out throughout adulthood. And we don't step back and question, what is it that we're putting into our bodies? How can we be more mindful of that? And what kinds of foods might be better that still I enjoy and still want to continue eating, that we just haven't had enough, information on. And so our goal is really to help elucidate what kinds of foods might be better for you to try and incorporate into your day-to-day.
Exactly. I think how amazing is it that what you eat every day can actually have an incredible impact, better than a pill, better than a procedure, on your long-term health and your whether you live or die. I mean, that is huge. So we wanted to jump in and talk today about specifically the Mediterranean diet, because it's actually the diet with the best evidence that we have. That's why we often recommend it, especially in cardiology, for reducing the likelihood of heart attacks. But it just so happens that it's also a great diet for preventing dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer. And so it's really an amazing diet, an amazing place to start when we're talking about food as medicine.
It might be fun to talk about your journey in food and diet, maybe as a, little 5-minute intro or something, where we can just talk about how your relationship with food developed as you grew older, but also maybe as a physician, as someone who likes to cook and bake.
My favorite class in undergrad was medical ethnobotany. I was at Berkeley studying integrated biology. Dr. Carlson was a practicing physician, but also botanist at Berkeley. And he taught this incredible course that basically was all about food as medicine. And he had traveled the world and gone out into nature with indigenous people around the world and learned about the plants that they've used as medicine for centuries.
Wow.
So this class really instilled in me that food is medicine and that plants are medicine. I became vegetarian. And this was really the beginning of my interest in the integrative approach. And so after undergrad, when I graduated, I was going to med school, but I graduated early and I went to go work in Ireland at a cooking school that is on a 100-acre organic farm. It has an acre large greenhouse. It was called Ballymaloo. And I worked in the restaurant, but I got to also take any cooking classes I wanted. They let me do, which was really cool. And I ate all food from the farm. Everything was homemade. Every cracker, butter, yogurt, everything was completely homemade and from the farm.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I was really inspired that they treated food as something sacred, that they were giving people this incredible positive experience through food. And it was life or death in that kitchen, being part of one of the top restaurants around the world, getting to see the inner workings of it. They viewed it as life or death. It was like, we need to get this food out and give these people the experience of a lifetime through this food. And I was so inspired by food as being sacred, food as being a positive experience, that it actually informed how I wanted to practice medicine, because I wanted to give people a positive experience through medicine. And I didn't like the cold, stark, usual exam rooms, the really quick visits. not really empowering, not that patients left not feeling better than when they came. And then when I found integrative medicine, that's where I thought, this is what I was hoping for. I'm so happy this exists because I think people can leave feeling empowered and feeling better than when they came. And so all that to say, it really is that experience really inspired me. And it also made me want to combine healthy food that's good for the body and good for prevention of chronic disease with food that's incredible and delicious and secret.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how many doctors do you meet that can say they had that kind of experience where they lived on a farm, got to see where their food came from, understand it in a new light, that when you're talking about food, we can read about it. And of course, we can eat at these great restaurants, but so rarely do we get the chance to go and see exactly where it comes from, every step of the process, meet people who live that life day in, day out, have done it for generations, made it their livelihood. What a gift.
But what about you? I mean, I think you have a real deep connection to your heritage foods and foods that you've grown up cooking with your parents. So tell me about your history with food.
Food has always been an expression of love growing up. You know, when my mom raised my sister and I, she cooked every meal for us. We would get the occasional fast food. Taco Bell was a favorite, commonly among Indian kids, because it has the perfect spice and vegetarian balance that a lot of Indian households and families always look for. My mom prided herself on her cooking, and she loved to see her kids enjoy and feel so good when she fed us. And so I grew up eating a lot of traditional Indian food, homemade food that you won't necessarily see at the classic Indian restaurants, that I took for granted at first. You know, you grow up with it, you think that maybe everyone's living like this. And in some cases, I would feel sort of embarrassed because my food looked different or smelled different. You know, didn't eat meat until I was in high school because my mom is vegetarian and she only cooked vegetarian food. So that was the start of my relationship with food. It was really it was a relationship of love, you know. So early on, I had that experience, but then I started to really be conscious of and understand as something that not a lot of people might have, or if they do, they might not then also see food not just as an expression of love and something that is so deeply rooted in their heritage and culture, but also as something that can transform your health, your attitudes, your day-to-day. And so it wasn't really until medical school and residency, when I dove deep into medicine, that I started to add that layer to food. And spending time in the kitchen in college and gap years and medical school, I would experiment, I would try things. I never felt the confidence to really live up to my mom's cooking. And so it wasn't until residency that I took extra steps, pushed myself, felt motivated to give it a go. And man, has that been a gift just to get in the kitchen. And again, I'm not a great cook. I wasn't at all someone that could whip up a meal like that. But I just wanted to try new things and sort of have ownership over what I was putting into my body. You know, when you go to a restaurant or you order takeout, you can optimize it. You can try to find the healthy stuff, but it can be expensive. It can have ingredients that you're not familiar with, or you might not fully realize are inside those dishes. And so to cook, yeah, at first it might not taste as great as a restaurant prepared dish, but there's something to be said about seeing all the ingredients that you want to put into the dishes that was so cool to me. Maybe it's the science background in me that contributed, but then to work on that craft and get a little better about it, not burn dishes, instead be able to share what I made with my friends and have them love it, showed me the power of cooking, and got a little faster, saved more time. Also dove into other cuisines that I had never really experienced, cooking Korean dishes, Chinese dishes, Argentinian dishes that I hadn't even fathomed or tried. It shows you the breadth when you start to cook and get deeper into this field. You get deeper into cooking, you start to see the possibilities and expand your palate, expand your mind. Then I started to travel, go to Japan, go to places that, cuisines that I knew I liked the flavor profile, but hadn't really fully experienced until I got to go to these places. So, now what a gift I feel like it is to have found so much love for cooking. I'm still bringing that same love that I had as a kid that my mom instilled in me when I get to cook for a friend or family, when I get to bake for you or for anyone. And
changed my life. All oil cake.
I love using food as a way to show my gratitude towards the people I get to make it for.
I think we've hit upon the different meaning behind food, multiple different meanings. So food as medicine, food as joy, food as love, food as service, food as heritage and family. So there's just so much to it. And it's way more than just a diet that you have to follow. There's just so much richness behind the idea of food. And then we've also hit upon step one, which is cooking. We cannot talk about food without talking about cooking and getting involved with the food that you're consuming and the ingredients that you're using. And I think that really is step one. We actually plan to have an entire episode about culinary medicine and about what cooking skills we need to have, about seasonal ingredients, local ingredients. So we are going to be talking about that. And I really like that we started with this zoomed out view about food and the significance of food in our lives, in our histories, and also talk about cooking and how that is essential to eating a healthy diet. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit more and talk specifically about the Mediterranean diet because we have such incredible evidence for that eating pattern.
I know so many people that can talk about their relationship and have these similar stories about whether it be meals that they share with their families or friends or experiences they've had cooking and giving to others, or the connection they felt with their culture or new cultures and learning and growing in that way. Food is something that is not just, a nice thing we get to all experience. It's essential to the human experience.
So we're going to talk about a randomized clinical trial called the PREDIMED trial. Why do we love randomized clinical trials? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So when we're talking about evidence-based medicine, we love to use trials to guide our management styles. And randomized controlled trials are sort of near the peak of the evidence hierarchy. Randomized controlled trials essentially allow us to remove bias from the studies where we compare current practice modalities with newer treatments. Through randomization, we get to see how the intervention that we provide is making a difference compared to a control group. Mm-hmm. And so we try to essentially make sure that all the other factors that, someone in a control group versus an intervention group might differ on, we try to normalize that as much as possible. So the only real change that we introduce is the intervention. And that's the power of a randomized control trial is this, the researchers get to manipulate one factor as much as we can and control for the other ones so we can see the power, the benefits of the intervention that they employ.
Exactly. We don't have to kind of say, oh, well, those people that were eating that type of diet, they were also healthy for XYZ other reasons. And maybe that's why they had this positive effect. So we're actually able to zoom in on the effect that we want and see, is there causality for that intervention and the result that we're seeing? So it's high quality evidence. In cardiology, we're all about the randomized controlled trial. And so the PREDIMED trial, we're going to actually talk in depth about the PREDIMED trial, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the CORDIOPREV trial, which are the two big randomized controlled trials about the Mediterranean diet. So the PREDIMED trial is a famous randomized controlled trial it's in Spain at multiple centers. It enrolled 7,447 patients, 55 to 80 years of age. 57% were women, which is huge for a randomized controlled trial in cardiology. In these patients, it's called primary prevention. So that means that they don't have the disease yet, but they were at risk of getting heart disease or stroke. So they were at risk, but none of them had cardiovascular events previously. So that's primary prevention. And they were randomized to a Mediterranean diet with olive oil, Mediterranean diet with nuts, or a controlled diet, which was a low-fat diet.
That's right.
And so I think we can go through the results and then talk a little bit about the methods and the exact ingredients that they were eating, and try to consider each ingredient as a medicine for the heart. And how can we all, every time we eat, try to think about, okay, how can I eat something that's actually a medicine for the heart?
Perfect.
So what did the results show?
Yeah, so the results demonstrated that in the Mediterranean diet groups, you saw a significant reduction in cardiovascular events compared to the control group, approximately 30% difference, which was huge. To control, like we've talked about, the factors other than the Mediterranean diet and see that intervention alone accounted for such a dramatic change in events of cardiovascular, events. I mean, huge, definitely was a game-changing study that put the Mediterranean diet on physicians and cardiologists' minds of saying, all right, we cannot ignore the impact that this diet can have.
Exactly. So the primary endpoint they were looking at is our favorite in cardiology, major adverse cardiovascular events, or MACE, which include myocardial infarction, heart attack, stroke, or death from a cardiovascular cause. We love to see a hard endpoint like MACE. So this is really an amazing trial. And like Kunal mentioned, the hazard ratio for having a major cardiovascular event was 0.69 in the Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil and 0.72 for Mediterranean diet with nuts, so about a 30% drop. Hazard ratio just means the likelihood of having an event for that group. So when we say a hazard ratio of 0.69, that really means they were 69% as likely to have one of those negative events as compared to the control group. So that's really a huge effect. 69% compared to the control group is an astounding number. It's not something we commonly see with medications we prescribe that are sort of the traditional modality of treatment. And diet, like a Mediterranean diet, is something that we can essentially have patients do in a cost-effective way that has real benefit. And a randomized control trial like this study shows us that power of a simple intervention like a diet change that doesn't have side effects that medications can have and other treatments can have. Exactly. And I think another cool aspect about this trial was that they were able to demonstrate that the intervention group had a significant shift in their dietary pattern compared to the control. They used surveys where they were able to quantify their Mediterranean diet score and see those improve over time. And they even tested some biomarkers to show that these patients in the Mediterranean diet group were modifying their diet. So they're able to show a significant shift in the dietary pattern, which I think even is an interesting finding in itself, to show that the participants were successful. This wasn't something that was such a punishment and so terrible that they couldn't adhere to it. They were able to adhere to it, and they were able to shift their dietary pattern. So let's dive into, now that we know that this can prolong your life, they were actually less likely to die from a cardiovascular cause in the Mediterranean diet groups compared to the control group, which ate a low-fat diet. Let's go into what it is that they were eating.
Perfect.
So first off, they ate greater than or equal to 4 tablespoons of olive oil per day. I think this is really exciting because I think oftentimes foods that taste so good are bad for you. But this just goes to show you that that is not the case, because olive oil to me is such a delicious wonder of the world.
Right.
And they actually had 4 tablespoons per day or more.
Right. I mean, we love olive oil.
Yeah.
We use it all the time. And Liz, do you think it matters, what kind of olive oil you use? Like, sometimes people say, oh, I got to get the highest quality from, Italy or Greece. How does that play a role?
I think that having a high polyphenol content olive oil is better. And it used to be that actually the Moroccan olive oil from Trader Joe's was an example of a high polyphenol olive oil. I don't think that they have that anymore. A surefire way to get a high polyphenol content olive oil is to go to oliveoillovers.com. We're not associated with oliveoillovers.com, by the way, but you can actually sort by polyphenol content.
That's awesome.
And just buy one that's not the super strong one, just one level below.
Isn't it?
And I think it's, kind of the moderate tasting olive oil, but get a higher polyphenol content is better.
Gotcha. Yeah. So polyphenols are key. And so something to think about when you're buying olive oil. Of course, you're going to get benefit from any olive oil that you're using compared to, say, oils with more saturated fats. Because
you're going to get benefits. And I really like discussing this about food is, do I have to have the organic from the farm? Or do I have to have, some fancy olive oil? No, just make the choice first. You're going to get the benefits of the polyunsaturated fats and the polyphenol content. And you're already winning just by making that choice. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Totally. Yeah. A big part of our discussions will always be emphasizing we want this to also be cost-effective stuff. Mm-hmm. So not breaking the bank, buying only the highest quality ingredients to make your diet work. We can have great diets that follow these guidelines that don't break the bank.
Amazing. Next is tree nuts and peanuts. They had greater than or equal to 3 servings per week. And a serving is about half a cup.
Yeah. Tree nuts, people might question, like, what kind of nuts can I eat? Tree nuts are literally just nuts grown on trees. So these are like your almonds, your walnuts, cashews. Those are the ones that, you might commonly have encountered on a day-to-day when you're going to the nut aisle section in the grocery store. Those are, the classic tree nuts that are packed with healthy fats, that are nutritious, have some protein, vitamin, minerals that are great for heart health. So those are the ones that, the study had shown, in addition to peanuts, which are actually legumes, also provide excellent benefit. And, also rich in proteins, also rich in healthy fats.
Yeah. And doing something like toasting a nut can change the taste of it. It's amazing on a salad. Toasting a nut, putting into something you're baking. It, like you said, adds some nutritional value.
Perfect. Love it.
Next ingredient, fresh fruits, greater than or equal to 3 servings per day. And the serving was a half a cup. So fruit is another amazing ingredient that's delicious, that is part of a healthy diet, that's a medicine for your body.
Yeah. So fresh fruit. Sometimes people want to, avoid sugars. They think that anything sweet, I should try to cut out. which reasonable thing to think about. And what happens is people might stop eating fruit, thinking that, especially people who are on, say, a keto diet or a sugar restricted diet, might find as a way to lower their sugar intake. At the same time, this diet shows us that, half a cup of fruit with, natural sugars actually provides benefit, and sugar isn't always the enemy here. So, natural fruits, things like strawberries, blueberries, apples, oranges, these are things that we shouldn't feel guilty about eating, especially in moderation. Yes, they're sweet, but they can add some richness to a lot of the dishes that we like to cook and make.
Fruit has a lot of fiber in it as well. So it's not just sugar, but it's not just a simple sugar, but it's a complex carbohydrate and has a lot of benefits for you. So we'll get in more depth about sugar and glycemic index in a later episode. There definitely are some fruits that are more sugary than others. So when I'm talking to someone who has diabetes, I'm kind of saying avoid the tropical fruits like pineapple, melon, and banana, and aim more towards some of the fruits you mentioned, like berries, especially those dark fruits,
right.
The dark skin, dark cherries, plums, blueberries, those types of things. Citrus also has a lower glycemic index. So some fruits are less sugary than others, but in general, it's an amazing thing to reach for. Some little bit of fruit, berries, some nuts. That's an incredible snack, an incredible dessert.
Yeah, like Liz mentioned with these darker fruits and berries, we're noticing, and we're going to talk about antioxidant effects that these can have that also are demonstrating some real benefit with newer studies coming out that you shouldn't discount. And, a lot of these fruits also, have a high water content and can help provide some hydration in classic American diet that doesn't have a lot of water intake.
Next ingredient, vegetables greater than or equal to 2 servings per day.
Totally. Yeah. A lot of people, like myself included, didn't love eating vegetables growing up. Very classic thing. I loved rice. As an Indian kid, rice was my staple thing. I filled my plate up with some lentils and, curry or, masalas. That was my go-to. But what I grew up understanding is how vegetables in American diets, might not be as tasty as you might think compared to other types of foods, but there are so many ways to experiment in the kitchen with vegetables that can add a lot of flavor through spices, through different combinations of vegetables, how you cook it, roasting, frying, things like that can keep that nutritional value in as a core part of your diet.
I think it's finding the vegetables that you enjoy and then cooking them or preparing them in a way that's delicious and amazing. Like my husband and I posted on Instagram, we had this green Valentine's dinner and we made a homemade pesto sauce that had actually arugula and basil, a ton of arugula and basil in it, olive oil, a little bit of pine nuts, a little bit of Parmesan cheese. And then we made homemade pasta, which was the fun part of it. And then we had half the plate was an arugula salad with just olive oil and lemon on it.
Oh, man.
And then I also roasted some broccolini with just salt and pepper and olive oil on it. And it was delicious. And think of all the vegetables we had on that plate, but it was such a treat at the same time.
A lot of my friends who aren't Indian have talked to me about how they love eating Indian food because they don't feel like they're missing meat when they go to an Indian restaurant that might be vegetarian. You'll get a lot of lentils. You'll get, spinach dishes, like one's called saag paneer, where it's spinach sort of mashed and boiled up in a way with a lot of spices that make you feel like you're eating like a creamy dish, but it's heavy on the vegetables, right? Same with eggplant dishes. Okra is my favorite, bindi masala. I could go on and on about all the different dishes that Indian cuisine inspires and, provides these outlets for vegetables in a way that I don't feel like I'm sacrificing anything.
Find one that you like, and even just that one that you like, maybe it's broccolini, maybe it's okra, then you can really change your dietary pattern in a huge way just with that one change. So this is maybe a good point to bring up because you're bringing up your heritage diet, the Indian diet, and we're talking about the Mediterranean diet. And I just wanted to point out that this Mediterranean diet, this clinical trial we're talking about was done in Spain. That's their heritage diet. But it doesn't mean that we can't apply it to different other heritage and still keep the overall pattern and the different food groups that are consumed in the Mediterranean diet. And there's a really great resource that I love called Old Ways. And they talk about different heritage diets, Mediterranean, African heritage diet, Asian heritage diet, Latin American, and kind of give a food pyramid of that traditional heritage diet and show how actually all of these heritage diets are more similar than different. They're all plant forward and they all have health benefits. So I think we can just look at this Mediterranean diet as a framework, but we're not married to this exact heritage cuisine.
That's so true. Such a great point. Because if you tell a patient or anyone, hey, the Mediterranean diet has the most evidence, which it does, and we're showing benefit with it. Really, what we're trying to boil it down to is what are the proportions of food groups that the Mediterranean diet just happened to employ sort of originally as its baseline heritage diet. But we have to respect that everybody has their own takes, their own, foods that they grew up eating. And it's not right to tell someone, hey, you got to stop eating whatever food. Masala. Yeah, exactly. You got to stop eating the foods that you identify so much with and love so much when, there's another cuisine that could be better. No, we want you to eat whatever cuisine speaks and resonates the most with your heart.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're just providing the guidelines or demonstrating basically how we can translate the Mediterranean diet guidelines and ingredients to your cuisine of choice.
Yeah. Awesome. So next ingredient is fish, especially fatty fish and seafood. They had greater than or equal to 3 servings per week. So fish was a big part of this diet and a great food to incorporate healthy fats, again, that unsaturated fat and wonderful protein source.
Completely agree. Fish to me has been something that I never grew up eating and always thought, maybe perhaps ignorantly, didn't taste that great. I lived in Arizona, didn't live near any body of water. So I didn't trust, fish that came my way too often. Then, moved to North Carolina, came to San Diego, discovered sushi for the first time, and noticed how much better I felt when I ate fish, how tasty fish was, especially prepared with, a Japanese approach. But even salmon that I prepare myself now, I mean, man, fish is super easy to cook, really nutritious, like Liz mentioned, with the healthy fats, something that the Mediterranean diet definitely demonstrates benefit and efficacy with.
So one possible choice that's heart healthy is fish. So something you could think about on a menu if you're at a restaurant, that'd be a great choice. And I think, all of these are just things to keep in mind as this is a medicine for the heart. Oh, that's something I could put on my plate. That's actually good for me.
Totally.
Next ingredient is legumes, greater than or equal to 3 servings per week.
Nice.
What are some examples of legumes?
So something like kidney beans, like garbanzo beans.
Black beans. Yeah. Well, cannellini beans.
Oh, yeah, cannellini beans.
Which Kunal just ate for lunch. So legumes are great. Another source of protein. And again, part of that plant-forward diet.
Yeah, a lot of options there. And something like hummus, you don't even realize you're eating legumes. lot of protein, great ways to find substitutes for meat if that's something that you're trying to do, but also ways to add flavor and texture to salads and to other dishes that you might be interested in. So
next ingredient was sofrito, greater than or equal to 2 servings per week. And sofrito, that's one of the traditional Mediterranean diet, even in Spain, which is basically where they cut up tomato, garlic, and onion, add herbs. And then they simmer all those ingredients in a fair bit of olive oil. And they use that to dress vegetables, pasta, rice, and other dishes. And I think, again, going back to that heritage diets, I think lots of different heritage diets have a similar sauce. I'm sure that, and actually for sure know that is in the Indian cuisine. And I actually recently made a groundnut stew, which is a big aspect of the African heritage diet. And they almost had a very similar basis to that stew as Frito. So
it's actually super tasty. Yeah, to combine those ingredients, garlic, onions, tomatoes, peppers. I mean, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it, honestly. And so, yeah, not hard to contribute to a lot of the dishes to add a bit of flavor, add some texture. I love it. So I would challenge people to, try to think about those whenever you're making a dish, maybe veering off the path of the classic recipes that you're thinking of and trying to incorporate some of those sofrito-based ingredients.
Also smells amazing. All you have to do is start sauteing the onion and people are like, ooh, what are you making?
Yeah, instant chef right away. The aroma.
Next ingredient, white meat instead of red meat. They didn't give a specific amount to the participants in the trial, but definitely substituting out white meats like chicken and turkey for the red meats.
Like vegetables, you think, all right, this is something that I got to eat to be healthy, and I'm sacrificing what I would rather eat. I can't tell you how many dishes I've had now that are completely white meat based, that just through sheer flavor profile, through spices, through added ingredients, completely change that perception of me as this is a sacrifice I gotta make, and just enrich my diet completely. And very versatile, very convenient, can be very cost effective too.
I think flavor is so key. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like tofu. And I don't think tofu is good if you don't flavor it at all. And neither is chicken if you don't flavor it at all. So learning, going back to, we keep talking about culinary as a big part of a healthy dietary pattern, but learning how to make the food taste amazing is so key.
Very true.
So lastly, this was optional, wine with meals, and that was only for people who already had that habit, but they had greater than or equal to 7 glasses per week. So about 1 glass of wine with their meals in the evening. And that's something that if I say to patients, if you do already have red wine with dinner, you can continue that. Not something that I usually encourage to start if someone doesn't already.
Alcohol, we understand, has associations with cancer risk that the Surgeon General had just put out a report on this year, demonstrating essentially that we need to be more cognizant of our alcohol intake. So while this study does show that there can be a role for alcohol in patients who are already drinking alcohol, we wouldn't encourage anyone or ask anyone to increase their alcohol intake, just given the risks and harms that we know are also possible.
So they discouraged a few things in this trial. I like that we're focusing on things to incorporate, which is a much more positive spin on it. That's like how I like to talk to patients about it. What can you incorporate that's a medicine for your body? But they discourage soda, commercial bakery goods, sweets and pastry, spread fats, red and processed meats. So things to kind of steer away from, no hard and fast rules. We're talking overall dietary pattern here, but things to keep in mind a little bit steer away from because that's what they did in this trial.
There's a lot of common sense things that we as a culture have associated with not being healthy. It's always good to just be mindful of things like excess sweets, excess sugars, and also a lot of simple carbs and fried foods, processed foods. And it's something that we'll definitely dive into more on why these foods aren't good for you. And also to think about, it's easy to just say, hey, don't eat these foods, but hard for people to put into practice, and reasonably so. These foods, are marketed and taste delicious, and they offer some caloric benefit. So they make you feel full. Sometimes they're cheaper in certain ways. So we can't sit here and say, oh, you just shouldn't eat it, and, get upset or annoyed when people aren't able to follow those recommendations. We got to be mindful of how we can best think about ways to cut those foods out, and also still enjoy what we do and how we eat, not make it a huge barrier and get so caught up in
demonizing.
Exactly. Demonizing, feeling down on ourselves when we eat those foods. That's not a healthy way to go about it. So we're definitely going to get into best practices and ways to think about improving your diet slowly but surely.
Absolutely. So PREDIMED trial, large randomized controlled trial, which is high quality data, where they found that Mediterranean diet reduces major adverse cardiovascular events, meaning heart attack, stroke, or dying from a heart-related reason, about 30% reduction by eating Mediterranean diet, which is really incredible and so powerful. And we just talked about some actually delicious, wonderful foods that they were all eating and how we can incorporate those into our day-to-day lives as medicine. But we also wanted to focus on how it's not a magic in the Mediterranean diet itself. This can be applied to lots of other heritage diets. And there's an incredible resource online, which we're going to link, called Old Ways, that will go through the unique food pyramids of different heritage diets from around the world.
Yeah, it's so helpful to lay out what food groups are good for us, the proportions that might be best for us in an evidence-based way, using a randomized control trial, the biggest that we have, to show us, how we can tailor our day-to-day food groups and diets that we eat. And also, like Liz said, think about how we can use the current diet that we have and shape it rather than completely adopt a whole new cuisine that we might not be familiar with or flavor profile we might not enjoy. Let's use what we have and enhance it in ways that are easy, cost-effective, and sustainable.
Exactly. And that trial was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of the best medical journals that we have. And it was published in June of 2018. We wanted to just highlight one more clinical trial. We mentioned that the PREDIMED trial was primary prevention, meaning none of those participants had a cardiovascular event previously, no strokes, no heart attacks. This was also studied more recently and published in The Lancet, another high-quality medical journal, and studied in secondary prevention, meaning they took all patients who had already had a cardiovascular event, and they did the same exact thing. They had randomized 1,002 patients to either a low-fat diet or the Mediterranean diet. Very similar setup to the PREDIMED trial. And they found, again, about a similar reduction in major adverse cardiovascular events. The hazard ratio ranged from 0.719 to 0.753, depending on the model that they used in the Mediterranean diet group. So similarly, about a 30% reduction in major adverse cardiovascular events in patients who'd already had a heart attack or stroke.
Yeah, exactly. So like Liz said, comparing a low-fat diet to a Mediterranean diet, we're demonstrating, just like the first trial, similar results, similar reduction in patients who've had a cardiovascular event before, which is a different population than the first trial, and seeing a significant improvement just through the dietary changes. It was also demonstrated over a 7-year time span, like a longitudinal benefit.
Really just kind of the tip of the iceberg here. I think it was great to start out talking about food as medicine and talking about the Mediterranean diet because it is the diet with the most evidence. We've got high quality randomized controlled trials demonstrating a benefit to cardiovascular outcomes, which is really the gold standard in cardiology and in medicine. So I'm glad we started out talking about this, but there's a lot more to talk about. I think in the future, we've already touched on this episode. We're going to talk about culinary medicine. We're going to talk about sugar, glucose. We're going to talk about dairy. We didn't really talk too much about dairy. How do I incorporate dairy? Is it okay to eat dairy? What dairy do I choose? Next, we're going to talk about eggs. And
we're really going to focus on the specifics that people always have questions on, that I have questions on myself. What about eggs? Are those good for you? I heard that the fats are too much. I heard that the protein content's great. I heard the yolk isn't as good for me. Maybe I should just do egg whites.
Shall we move to the question of the day segment?
Okay.
Where does your self-worth come from?
Oh my gosh. Where does my self-worth come from? It's a really, really great question. Someone asked me recently, what's the role you play in your friend group? And I got deeper and just thought about what's the role I play in the lives of the people that I interact with and spend time with. And my name, I discovered, means beautiful eyes, which is a nice thing to think about. But what I dug deeper on in understanding that definition is it means someone who sees the beauty in everything. And what I like to imagine my role is lifting people up, providing people with the viewpoint or vantage point to see the good in the situations that they're in. And it's something that I always look forward to doing with my friends, with my family, with my patients, with anyone I meet, is how can I help anyone see the good and the beauty in the situation that they're in? And I try to do it in a way that's honest. I don't like to provide false hope or dishonest encouragement. I do believe that every situation you can find the beauty in it. And when I get to do that, and when I feel that effect towards, my friends, the relationships that I cherish so much, and in my own life, that provides me with immense self-worth, more than I can describe. And so seeing the beauty in everything and having that gift and being able to provide it to the people I love, that's where I get my self-worth.
I love that. I love that even somehow your parents knew that was going to be something special about you.
Yeah, well, they named me Kunal because there was a little kid named Kunal down the street that they just liked.
Maybe they somehow knew.
Maybe deep down in some crazy way.
They connected with that name.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I just love how it has nothing to do with one specific thing or with your job or where you live or how much you have. It's something so much deeper that no one can ever take away from you.
My question was going to be, what's one thing this week that you felt so lucky to get to experience?
For me, it was horseback riding on the beach.
Oh my gosh. Tell me more.
I had worked a really long, hard week last week. I was super exhausted. I worked on Saturday and I was super tired Saturday evening. Sunday, I was also still feeling tired. Oftentimes in medicine, when you work really long hours all week, it doesn't go away. That was one night's sleep. I was still feeling tired. Wasn't sure I could kind of muster up the energy to go to the ranch, but I just, decided to drive there. Felt like I wanted to pull over and take a nap on the side of the road on my way. And I started working with the horse that I've been riding named Nevada, and having this incredible time, and my energy was coming back. And then I had this opportunity to go ride on the beach, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I did, and it really felt like I was in heaven.
Oh
The way that the fog was fading into the water and the sunset was happening, it was just gorgeous. And I was just so exhilarated.
Oh my gosh.
And it really revived me. And I just felt so blessed. I thought, wow, I worked such a hard week, and look at this incredible reward that I ended up with. So,
oh man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's like hearing you say it, I felt like I was there. And I could see your love come out for that experience and that gratefulness.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode today. I'm really excited. We talked about something that you can do that could save your life, which is truly incredible. I mean, how powerful is that?
Yeah.
You can save your life.
So food is a gift, and we feel really lucky and grateful to get to talk about that with you. So we're so excited that we've been able to discuss something that really can save your life. So next time, what are we going to talk about, Liz?
Next time, we're going to talk about culinary medicine. I feel like it's a natural progression. And we'll just talk about something we referenced a lot in this episode, which is how do we learn some basic cooking skills and some basic knowledge about healthy ingredients and combine that to create something incredible, an act of love, an act of joy that can be a sustainable dietary pattern for your entire life.
Love that. Culinary medicine. So bringing cooking together with medicine. I mean, come on.
We have to do a quick legal disclaimer, which is that the name of this podcast is Sage Advice. Sounds like medical advice from two licensed medical providers. No. This is advice that we give to our family and friends. It is not formal medical advice. Please consult your licensed medical provider for actual medical advice that's tailored and unique to you. We are simply sharing information that we want to share with our own family and friends on this episode.
That's right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Tune in next time.